Hey everybody, it's JT, Executive Director of the Streaming Video Alliance. I'm really excited to be talking about this next paper, because with the advent of self-contained VR headsets, 6 degrees of freedom, and improved encoding, the VR experience, especially for live events such as sports, is becoming more tangible, especially with physical fan participation limited by things like COVID-19. But VR workflows, which involve more cameras, specialized equipment, and different software, are really complicated. This paper looks at the entire VR workflow from content acquisition to playback and examines how it can complement an existing 4K broadcast workflow to provide an enhanced viewing experience. Now, of course, it'd be really cool if you could see this next presentation in VR, but it's going to be really great, so here you go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mauricio Aracena. I am the president of VRIF, also work for Ericsson, dealing with the standardization activity within media for 5G. Today, together with Osgur from Intel, we're going to present our technical paper on live VR workflows. My first part, it's about live VR workflow, deployments, and new technologies. First, I'm going to talk about what use cases is about in order to understand what's happening within the flow of the video. First, we have the content acquisition. In this case, the broadcaster delivered 2 streams. One is linear live TV, which is represented with the red arrows. And then the venue is surrounded also with VR cameras around. And all those feeds are sent as well with the same sort of change of the television, but this is depicted as a yellow arrow. When you capture VR, basically you capture 360 full scene and sphere of the area, so it's a full 360 video, which is sent doing exactly the same path as linear TV. Once it goes to the whole broadcaster, it's probably exchanged to another broadcaster for later distribution. Then both content are prepared for delivery to the consumer. For instance, television, it's sent normally over terrestrial, over TV, or maybe over cable or satellite, while 360 video VR, it's sent over probably an internet connection and using a streaming mechanism. So for instance, in this case, you may send it in viewport dependent delivery, which is something that we're going to talk about later. At the end, basically the user will get to see the big screen on TV, the event from the TV, and at the same time have a second feed that is using a second screen like a VR headset, a tablet, or another TV where you can see the synchronized VR content. Once we talk about the use case, now I'm going to show about different steps in the workflows. And this is divided in 4 areas: event action area, the event OB facility, the host facility, and the consumer environment. In the event action area is basically where you place all the cameras. It's not much different between the television and the VR Live, with the sole difference that in VR Live you have a specific 360 cameras or 180-degree camera depending on the setup. And each of the cameras that are capture VR, it may contain several type of audio mixing. Both of them together with linear TV and VR Live are sent normally within the venue with SDI or fiber links. And some of the cameras may also be connected wirelessly, where you multiplex the content and send over wirelessly to the OV band. In the OV band facility, you get the audio from the cameras, the control camera unit receive it and send it to the production facility, where you add, you do some tests, chroma key, for instance, and also add some logos and fix the audio a little bit, etc. And you add graphics, and then it prepare the content to send to the host, to the broadcast facility, which it can be encoded with a contribution encoder. In VR Live, it's not much of a difference. It's simply that you get more feeds or different feeds. The VR Live, it's sent on in a rectangular format, which is also used traditional mixer, a vision mixer. The difference here may be that the VR cameras may contain higher resolution, for instance, 8K versus traditional TV could be 4K. So you need to have a mixer that fits that requirement. And it's done the same thing with the audio and video as it's done with the traditional broadcast. It's one case that you add sent for a contribution encoder in 6A, and it's sent to another host facility for further processing or sent to another broadcast facility. When it's sometimes you may want to send directly to the VR to a mobile device, and some content needs maybe change a little bit in order to fill with the visual need. For instance, you may want to change the size of the graphics and make a different cut, but normally it's the same thing. Finally, in our facility, both linear TV and VR are simulcasted, so it's important that the synchronization remains over the complete workflow. So time synchronization is important, so you need to add a sort of timing for each feed, so when actually it's rendering to a consumer, you can synchronize them. Another interesting aspect that it started to happen today, which probably start with VR, but also can happen with broadcast, is that you may not need an event OV facility. You just take the feed from the cameras and send it directly to a fiber links using, for instance, SDI to a cloud sort of host facility. The host facility, the processing is done as usual. You receive the feed, you decode it from the contribution encoder. Same for a VR Live. And in that case, you prepare the content to be for home delivery, either sending, for instance, in the 9 for satellite, cable, or direct to home. When it's come to VR, it's not much of the difference using a traditional host facility. But in a case that you have a cloud sort of processing or how you process the VR content, it may be that it is done using a game engine. And these sort of things allow more freedom to play with the VR content. And finally, the VR Live content is delivered to consumer, either via broadband or wireless 5G, and it also processes in a way that you can send it more optimized. For instance, you prepare using viewport independent delivery, the full 360 video directly to the user, or using viewport dependent technology, something that Oscar is going to talk in the second part. At the end, the consumer receives the feed from the cable, satellites, or the air, and it's rendered over the TV, the traditional TV broadcast. Both content are ideally synchronized, so the user watch the VR content using a second screen like a tablet, or then put it the VR headset on to see in more immersive the content. And an important thing is if they are synchronized, you get the feeling that what's happening in the big TV happen in the VR headset. Today is not de facto standard. There's some delays on that, but we hope in the future, because there is technology to do that. And the end, the user is consume the content and enjoy the immersive experience using a second screen. After I talk about the workflows, and we see that there's a great potential of SMPTE in VR, because given the fact that there are so many cameras, so many microphones, it's important to synchronize the content and combine it in a proper way. Also, each camera may have a specific positioning information, and you have camera rigs that they may capture moments in different parts of the venue, and you wanted to coordinate and synchronize it to process further in the cloud. So ST2110 will allow to have more freedom to process VR content. And this will, for instance, allow to have a volumetric acquisition, which is a setup where you have cameras facing to an object and creating 3D assets. Use cases for this is personal point of view, where the user can see a specific point that is generated from all the cameras where they specifically create a virtual camera of the area. Or you can choose my favorite. You may have several VR cameras that send to the user and choose one of them, and you follow which one you are more interested. Our paper also talk about industry deployment on live VR, and we have basically one case which is Style Media. It's in IPC in 2019 they stream live 8K 360 VR content, but using a viewport dependent technologies, which means that you only have a 4K device, but you deliver the 8K equivalent quality. Here you can see that the workflow is quite similar to what we have described from the theoretical workflow that I just showed recently. Intersport is another big organization which investing a lot on new technologies, mainly related to volumetric capture with camera arrays. They call the TrueView a solution that can generate any points from the stadium and deliver it to the consumer as a personal point of view. And the TrueVR is a way you can create VR 360 content from the camera you have and deliver as a video on demand. Finally, I want to talk about recent advances on live VR and MPEG. The VRIF is working for instance in OMAF second edition, which is called VR 360 track, and we are going to address multiple viewpoints where you have several cameras and you want to stream one event over VR 360, and the user can choose which one to focus or look. Overlays is something very important. You basically can sell a specific area for your environment in VR 360 and make a targeted advertisement. And as well, we're going to target the new advanced styling profile, which is much better than the original OMAF 1.0 for viewport dependent. Osgur is going to talk about that. Another advance is volumetric content and point clouds. This is covered in the volumetric track within VRIF, and you create an asset with using camera capture rigs around the object, and you create a person with point clouds, several points around your body that generate an asset. And what we are going to work on that, and what MPEG has released recently, is a point cloud compression using a legacy 2D video decoder. It's a very interesting thing that you basically create the point cloud, encode it using, for instance, an HEVC codec, and it's sent to the device. The device, using the device capability of a HEVC decoder, can create and reconstruct the point cloud and be able to watch it in AR glasses, or VR headset, and so on. And this was my part, and then I let Osgur to talk about the second part of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mauricio. Now I'll present the second part of our talk. Let's talk about 8K 360 VR in VRIF guidelines. So before that, I want to quickly summarize the current guidelines activity in VRIF, where we started the guidelines development work back in 2017, and the initial guidelines that we have released in VRIF mainly focused on two 4K based profiles. One we call 4K viewport independent profile, VPI, and the other one is 4K viewport dependent profile, VPD. And both of these profiles are based on the MPEG OMAF standard, where I basically show this workflow that we have, where the player receives the OMAF formatted content, and then it basically parses the content, it extracts the elementary stream, and then the elementary stream is decoded by a 4K capable decoder device, which is aligned to basically HEVC main 10 level 5.1 in case of HEVC, or in case of AVC, this would be the progressive high profile level 5.1, which is again for 4K. And after the decoding, basically the bit stream contains the decoder rendering metadata, which is then used to recreate the 360-degree video by processing the texture and mapping it into 360 video, which is then rendered on the terminal. So this is the architecture for MPEG OMAF. And for MPEG OMAF, basically there are two profiles, and VRIF basically adopted these two profiles, both of which relied on 4K-based distribution formats and 4K decoding capability on the mobile devices. This is where we were at the beginning of 2020 when we started our work on 8K. Now, one more slide on the trade-offs between the two technologies. So VPI versus VPD. So VPI, which is viewport independent idea, as Mauricio also presented before, is to basically deliver the entire 360-degree video, but it deliver it in a way such that the entire 360-degree video is encoded with the same quality. So it's very simple to deploy. It reuses the existing, legacy encoders and legacy players, but it's not bandwidth efficient because the user at any given time only views about 12 to 14% of the content, while basically you encode and deliver the entire content in high quality. So with that observation, the viewport dependent paradigm basically only delivers a portion of the 360-degree video in high quality, which basically allows reducing the bandwidth requirement because of the focus on the viewport and only encoding that region in high quality. But what happens is that this requires a feedback link because as the viewport changes, as the user turns his head and looks at different portions of the video, basically what needs to happen is that this viewport information needs to be communicated back to the network, and then the right high quality portion of the content needs to be fetched. So this not only requires an update on the player side in order to enable this type of viewport adaptive delivery, but also it requires updates of the encoder in order to basically encode the content in different tiles so that the high quality delivery based upon the viewport can be achieved based on the tile-based approach. So this adds basically additional latency to the delivery, whereas for the VPI case, we only need to deal with motion to photon latency, which accommodates the rendering delay. But for VPD, there is the additional latencies that are associated to requesting the new viewport from the network, processing that information, encoding and passing on the high quality viewport back to the client, and then decoding and buffering that content. So these additional latencies basically need to be dealt with viewport dependent delivery. But nevertheless, because of the significant bandwidth efficiencies, and as Mauricio was also saying, because of the fact that this approach uses the 4K-based distribution profiles, but achieves resolutions per eye as if you were delivering 8K content, this was an attractive solution that made it into the VRIF guidelines, and also it was standardized by OMAF. But earlier this year, basically, VRIF also wanted to basically propose and develop an alternative approach, which basically relies on the viewport independent paradigm. We wanted the simplicity of the viewport independent solution, which would basically alleviate the need to do the tile-based delivery, alleviate the need to update the encoders, and also to update the dash clients. And one of the key motivations for this was that we observed that starting from this year, we are going to have new 5G-enabled devices coming into the market, mobile devices, and these basically have 8K decoding capabilities, which basically means that we could update the distribution formats from 4K to 8K and still be able to decode them with the improved decoding capabilities of the mobile devices. And also, now that these devices are 5G capable, the additional bandwidth that's required in order to distribute 8K content can be achieved by what we get from the improved capacities over 5G networks. So here I also show some of the latest devices that are entering into the market with 8K decoding capabilities. So with that observation, VRIF conducted the work this year and in the latest version of the VRIF guidelines release, where you can see the link here, we have defined the viewport independent profile for 8K content. So this profile from VRIF basically is completely compliant and aligned with what OMAF has for viewport independent profile, but with the only distinction, so it inherits all the properties, but the only distinction is that it requires the HEVC maintain level 5.1, which is required in order to decode 8K based content at 60 frames per second. So remember that for 4K, the OMAF profile required level 5.1. We need to now bump that up to 6.1. And the beauty of it is that we can leverage the existing infrastructure and we can match the same resolution per eye as the 4K viewport dependent profile. But we now no longer need to use viewport dependent processing. Not to say that viewport dependent processing is not useful. We still think that in the long term, viewport dependent processing will be used. But we think this 8K viewport independent profile is a pragmatic approach by bypassing the additional deployment requirements for viewport dependent processing and achieving the same resolution per eye, which is quite attractive. And we think it could basically ignite and facilitate faster deployments for VR360. So this is a more detailed technology comparison of the 4K viewport independent, 4K viewport dependent, and 8K viewport independent approaches. I'm not going to get into the details, but basically some of the main points that I summarized are you can see here in more detail. So the two points is that you can leverage the existing encoders, the existing players and infrastructure. The bandwidth requirement goes up, but we think this could be achieved via the additional availability of bandwidth in the 5G system, which basically is 10 times higher than, roughly 10 times higher than what 4G can offer. And in terms of the encoder bitrate comparison, so you can also find more details on this in our paper, but basically we observed that roughly a 50% increase in bitrate requirement is needed in order to encode 8K content, but also just like 4K HEVC encoders, we have 8K HEVC encoders coming into the market with content-aware encoding technology, which basically improves the encoding efficiencies and delivers bit rates that are very well achievable over 5G networks. So with all of these developments, and after the publication of Guidelines 2.2, VRIF also liaised MPEG because it's ideal to have MPEG profiles aligned with what we had. So we, and where the current limitation of the MPEG OMAF profiles was the fact that they were developed mainly for 4K content using HEVC level 5.1. And with that information, we have liaised via MPEG and proposed that MPEG considers adopting this a new profile that's enabled for 8K content delivery. And in response, actually, MPEG agreed to specify an unconstrained HEVC-based viewport-dependent profile, which will be included as part of the OMAF second edition, where the FDAS text is expected to be released following the October meeting of MPEG. So this newly proposed profile basically detaches the level 5.1 codec requirement on the bit stream from the OMAF profile definition and allows defining an operating point for 8K and resolutions beyond by external guidelines such as those from VRIF. As such, one could basically use this OMAF profile and be able to distribute 8K content with suitable bitstream conformance definitions, which can, for example, be introduced into the VRIF guidelines according to HEVC maintain level 5.1. So with that in mind, basically we envision a future network where for the 5G enabled devices, one could deliver 8K content over 5G. But then for the legacy 4G devices, one could still basically offer 4K based content, VR content, which would be delivered over the 4G network using 4G capable mobile devices. And with the adaptability that's offered by adaptive streaming protocols such as Dash, we envision a future network deployment where at least the 5G capable devices can achieve much better resolutions per eye using this 8K distribution format. So not only in MPEG, but also VRIF the work in VRIF triggered this new work item in 3GPP called Operation Points for 8K VR 360 video over 5G, where the objective is, just like in the case of MPEG, to specify operation points in the VR streaming specification of 3GPP, as well as the new video media decoding capabilities in 3GPP's 5G media streaming architecture in order to provide support for 8K video. So this work item was just approved in the 3GPP plenary meeting earlier. Actually, that was last week. And the work will begin in the November meeting of 3GPP, where these 8K-based capabilities would be enabled as part of 3GPP's 5G media streaming specifications. Thank you for listening. This is the end of our presentation. Now we can take any questions that you may have.